Okay. I think we're good now.
Let me make this full screen. Good morning. Today we'll be talking about fuel consumption KPIs. So in the automotive industry, fuel consumption is a very important part of making cars in this competitive industry. The use of data analytics can help to identify key performance indicators that manufacturers can use to develop the best performing car based on fuel consumption. That's what this story is going to be talking about today and identifying for the automotive industry. Going to next slide.
So a brief overview of what we'll be going through during our presentation is that the automotive manufacturer's goal, which is to develop best performing car based on fuel consumption, identify relationships between specification variables and fuel consumption target variables, identify predictors of fuel consumption, analyze influence of KPIs on fuel consumption, and identify leading manufacturers based on fuel consumption.
So this first scene of visualization is going over fuel consumption by car specifications, including fuel type, driveline, and whether the car is hybrid or non-hybrid. So first, we're going to look at city MPG. And for city MPG by fuel type, we see a distinct pattern where compressed natural gas had the highest average at about 24 miles per gallon, followed by diesel fuel, gasoline, and then E5. We can see that same pattern over here on our graph for highway MPG by fuel type. And we can see that distinct pattern, compressed gas, then diesel fuel, gasoline, and then E5. E85, excuse me. Next, here we're looking at driveline and city and highway MPG by driveline. So the distinct pattern that is shared between city and highway MPG shows that front-wheel drive performed the best and had the highest overall averages for miles per gallon, followed by all-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, and four-wheel drive. And when we're looking at hybrid, we do see that hybrid cars performed at higher average MPGs than non-hybrid cars for both city and highway MPG. But the differences, if you look, are very minimal, just a few miles per gallon difference between city MPG and city MPG for non-hybrid cars and hybrid cars. And the same is true for highway. We see here from non-hybrid cars and hybrid cars. So there's not truly a distinct pattern and significance between that pattern to say that this is a very important variable. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide.
And then for this slide, we'll be looking at fuel consumption by certain variables such as engine type, horsepower, torque, horsepower and torque. So looking at the first visualization of city MPG by engine type, we see that as a number of cylinders increased, city MPG decreased along the way. Well, then we see an exception for the 12 cylinders, where 12-cylinder cars has a slightly higher average city MPG than cars with 10 cylinders. Then while looking at the torque and the city MPG 4 horsepower, we see that sorry, excuse me, please. We see that as horsepower increased, the city MPG decreased along the way, but then we also see an exception to this relationship when the horsepower is between 422.80 and 476.60. And then also then we're looking down at highway MPG by engine type, we also see that same downwards negative regression slope, where as the cylinders in number of cylinders increased, the highway MPG decreased along the way, but then also with the slight exception of 12 when the engine type is 12 cylinders, well, there was a slightly higher which has a slightly higher average city MPG than cars with 10 cylinders. Again, also looking at torque and highway MPG, 4 horsepower, we see that it has a high as horsepower increased, the city MPG decreased. And then we're also, again, with the exception when the horsepower is between 422.80 and 476.60. What we can garner and conclude from based on all these visualizations is that engine type for city MPG and highway MPG are very similarly related when it comes to engine type and horsepower. Torque 4 horsepower. There was that great similarities, and there was not much difference in their performance.
I'm going to go to the next slide. So these visualizations are displaying the relationships between the fuel consumption variables and transmission specifications. The first specification we're going to be looking at is classification for city and highway MPG. As we can see, manual transmissions performed better and had higher overall averages for city and highway MPG. When we look further into the transmission, we see that manual still had the highest average MPG for both city and highway, and that it was manual, then automatic, then automatic select shift, followed by automatic. But the differences between these three categories is very minimal when comparing the three categories in city and when comparing the three categories in highway MPG. So this may suggest that classification and transmission aren't very strong influencers of both city and highway MPG. We break down transmission specifications further by the number of forward gears. When we're comparing the number of forward gears based on city and highway MPG, we see that there's not a very big difference in city MPG, which are the blue bars. There's not a very big difference, and we can't discern a specific linear pattern, whether the number of gears increases or decreases. And also the same is true for highway MPG. We can't discern a specific pattern, and it's pretty similar along each of the number of gear categories. So that also may suggest that there's not a strong relationship between these variables and the number of forward gears. This tree map here just kind of shows that overall, and cars with manual transmissions performed the best for highway and city when it had 5 cylinders. But neither forward gears nor the other two transmission classification, they didn't have strong relationships or distinct patterns like some of the other variables that we've seen. Let me go to the next slide.
Then this slide aims to basically point out key drivers and create a rules that manufacturers can follow while doing the creation of the car. So looking at the first the image on the upper left-hand corner, we see that the engine type is strong. It's a strong predictor of city MPG, and then with the strongest combination predictors being engine type with fuel type, driveline, hybrid, and horsepower. Then also looking over here at highway MPG, we see that the engine type is a strong predictor of highway MPG, with the strongest combination predictors being engine type with fuel type, driveline, number of gears, and horsepower. Comparing this two driver visualization, we see that the only distinct difference between city MPG and highway MPG is the hybrid selection that is present in city MPG, and the number of forward gears that is present in highway MPG. But then when we come down now to the lower section, we also are looking at a decision tree of the rules that can be gotten from the city MPG and the highway MPG. For the city MPG, we see that that follows is that for the rule that for the highest city MPG predicted value of 24.25 miles per gallon, cars that have four-cylinder less than 176 high horsepower is the overall rule. And then on looking at the highway MPG, we see that the rule for highway MPG is that the highest predicted value of 32.48 miles per gallon is cars that have four-cylinder front-wheel drive with less than 176 horsepower. What we can see with all this representation and all this visual between with all four visualizations is that all city MPG and highway MPG are very much similar and highly correlated in their making and in their usage. And we'll move on to the next slide, please.
Thank you. So like Clarius said, we saw strong similarities between the KPIs, the performance indicators, and predictors for both city and highway MPG, and those were engine type, fuel type, driveline, and horsepower. So getting the for getting the KPIs and their influence on city and highway MPG, we used a new target variable called combined MPG, which was calculated by taking city MPG times 0.55 and plus highway MPG times 0.45 as determined by the United States Environmental Protection Agency to come up with the fuel consumption variable combined MPG. This is used to talk about fuel economy and fuel consumption in the automotive industry. So first, we're going to look at the influence of fuel type and engine type on combined MPG. As we can see, four-cylinder cars performed the best for combined MPG. Specifically, four-cylinder cars that consume diesel fuel perform the best at 35.41 combined MPG. Next, we're going to look at how engine type and driveline influence combined MPG. We see here that again, four-cylinder cars perform the best based on combined MPG, and also that when the car is four cylinders and front-wheel drive, it performs the best and has the highest combined MPG at 27.2 miles per gallon. This next visualization shows the combined MPG and horsepower by engine type and driveline. So we're just adding in the additional key performance indicator. And it shows here down at the bottom that combined MPG was highest for cars with four cylinders, front-wheel drive, with an average horsepower of 162.13 horsepower. So again, we see a common thread, four cylinders, front-wheel drive. We continue to see that there. Looking at this next one, and now we're going to be looking as if there is groups for horsepower to determine where our specifications need to fall between to have the highest combined MPG and the best performance based on fuel consumption. When we're looking at that, we see here in green, the combined MPG was highest for cars with four cylinders that were front-wheel drive that consumed diesel fuel, and that was less than 153.8 horsepower. So if we can go back and look at the rules for city MPG and highway MPG, we still see the same thing. Four cylinders with the driveline being front-wheel drive, less than 176. We know that it meets that criteria. And also again, for highway MPG, four cylinders, front-wheel drive, less than 176 horsepower. So we see that cars using diesel fuel that are four cylinders, front-wheel drive, less than 153.8 actually had the highest combined MPG. So that's where we would want our specifications to be in the automotive industry to make the best performing car based on fuel consumption. Gonna go to next slide.
So now this slide is looking at what the leading manufacturers that make cars following those rules that have been set: four-wheel drive, four-cylinder cars with horsepower less than 176 or 153, depending on how you take it. And we see that the number one manufacturer of said cars that fall within those specifications is Volkswagen, with that has also produces um front-wheel drive four-cylinder cars that consume diesel fuel, but have a combined MPG of 35.41 with a horsepower again less than 176, 153, or 140 average MPG. Then the second car that falls within that range is the Mini, which also again follows the same pattern of front-wheel drive four-cylinder cars, but this time consuming gasoline. That also has a combined MPG of 25.82. Again, falling with the horsepower, falling with less than 176 horsepower. And then the third manufacturer of the automobiles will be Honda. Again, falling with the same pattern of the four-wheel drive four-cylinder cars, but this time using compressed natural gas as the fuel type, with a combined MPG of 29.4 and a horsepower of 113. Then what we see within all these leading manufacturers is that they follow that set rule for front wheel drive four-cylinder cars, with all of them having a horsepower less than 176.
So just to conclude our story today about fuel consumption and the KPIs and how they influence fuel consumption for the automotive industry to develop the best performing car based on fuel consumption, we saw strong relationships between engine type and miles per gallon, where miles per gallon for both city and highway increased as the number of cylinders decreased. We saw strong relationships between horsepower and MPG, whereas MPG decreases, horsepower increased. Then we saw distinct patterns between fuel type and MPG, where for both city and highway, compressed gas had the highest average miles per gallon, followed by diesel, gasoline, then E85. We also saw distinct patterns between driveline and MPG, where for both city and highway, front-wheel drive had the highest average MPG, followed by all-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, then four-wheel drive. The strongest KPI for city, or the strongest sole predictor for city, was engine type. And the strongest combination driver was engine type, fuel type, driveline, hybrid with horsepower. The strongest KPI for city, as we can see, was the same for highway, which was engine type. And for combination, it was engine type, fuel type, driveline, number of forward gears, and horsepower. Since there were so many strong relationships and distinct patterns between city and highway MPG, we took a look at fuel consumption based on combined MPG, which used both city and highway MPG. And we still saw that four-cylinder cars that are front-wheel drive consuming diesel fuel with less than 150.80 horsepower perform the best at 35.41 combined MPG. And that in this competitive industry between 2009 and 2012, Volkswagen was had the best performing car, followed by Mini and then by Honda. Overall, we were taking a look at the key performance indicators for fuel consumption, and we saw that engine type was the strongest key performance indicator at 4 cylinders. And then fuel type was a strong indicator, with diesel being the best when analyzing all factors together, then followed by compressed gas and gasoline, which was a little different than what was seen in the distinct patterns. That's why it's important to do a multivariate analysis like we did today. Thank you for watching our story. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day.